Ryan Reynolds, Under the Tudorscope, Part 7. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor, and we continue our examination of the evidence to make a determination as to what Ryan Reynolds is. Is he an empath? Is he a normal? Is he narcissistic but not a narcissist? Or is he a narcissist? The dispute involving his wife, Blake Lively, Justin Baldoni and Reynolds, along with other parties, has grown into quite a beast. Not only has there been extensive coverage through the media, but there's plenty of speculation about what's really been going on behind the scenes across social media. Not only has it spawned litigation, it has resulted in substantial speculation as to what has occurred between the parties, what actually might have motivated this fallout. Interesting though this speculation may be, this isn't actually of assistance with regard to an analysis of Reynolds. Indeed, what would actually prove far more productive with regard to those theories is to ascertain first what Reynolds is, and also Lively and Baldoni, and then that will enable one to interpret the actions of the parties through the relevant prism of what they are. Whilst the majority of the activity in this spat is more pertinent to assessments of Lively and Baldoni, it remains of relevance with regard to Reynolds for two reasons. Firstly, there are certain things that he is alleged to have done which are referenced in the lawsuits, and secondly, given the fact that he is the husband of Blake Lively, there is also value in the consideration of them acting by way of a joint enterprise, or the possibility that she has either influenced his behaviour or vice versa, so that he has been directing her conduct, which tells us something of itself. Let us commence with an overview of what has happened with regard to this dispute, in case you're not fully familiar with it. Back in January 2023, casting for It Ends With Us is announced. The author, Hoover, had written a bestseller, and Baldoni optioned the story for a film adaptation through his company, Wayfarer Studios. He did that back in 2019. Lively was cast as the lead in the film in January 2023, with Baldoni starring alongside her. In May 2023, filming was halted amid strikes because of the Hollywood Writers and Actors Guild strikes. It remained on pause at the time of the SAG-AFTRA strikes in July. Shooting resumed in January 2024. On the 9th of August 2024, It Ends With Us is released. Baldoni praises Lively, stating, "She was strong, funny and intelligent, all the things you want from a female heroine." He added, "There wasn't a part of this production that she didn't touch and have an influence on, and everything she put her hands on and her mind to, she made better." In light of what has come to pass, that comment is interesting with regard to her involvement, whereby she didn't touch any part of the production. Whilst his comment at the time was complimentary, when looked at in the light of further allegations, one might see that he was playing nice at that juncture, irrespective of what really had gone on. The film goes on to be a box office success, grossing a total worldwide of $351 million. By the 13th of August, there are rumours of a feud circulating, since Lively and Baldoni are avoiding one another. This happens during the film's promotion. People notice that they don't follow one another on social media, and many of the film's cast follow Lively, but not Baldoni. The author, Hoover, also notably keeps her distance from Baldoni. It's alleged that the cause of the rift was a result of fat-shaming, inappropriate comments, and Baldoni kissing for too long during scenes. The suggestion was, therefore, that it was Baldoni who was at fault. There were also suggestions that the rift had been caused by Lively and Reynolds being too involved with the film. Now, pausing there, Lively is involved as the lead actress, and there would be a suggestion that that's all that she ought to do. But it is suggested that she has got more involved in the film. Indeed, the allegations are that she sought to take over the film, make it her own, and exclude Baldoni from what was his production and his film. Naturally, I'll be examining Lively in due course, but the involvement of Reynolds is interesting, for if this is accurate, one has to ask, what on earth was he doing, being involved in a film that was nothing to do with him? He wasn't an actor in it, he wasn't the director, he wasn't a producer. So why was he involved? The evidence that has come out suggests that he was. Therefore, to suggest that actually he wasn't involved doesn't stand up. And this would demonstrate a lack of boundary recognition, that he's not, in essence, keeping his nose out from a production that has nothing to do with him. Might this evidence a need in some way for him to assert control over other parties by interfering in the film? The suggestion that he can't keep out of it is something which is notable. The motivation for why he got involved, well, there's lots of different theories, and the theories they shall stay for the moment. Baldoni hires crisis management and PR professional Melissa Nathan, who had previously represented Johnny Depp, and that was in relation to his defamation trial against Amber Heard. On the 15th of August, Blake Lively faces backlash for tone-deaf marketing. She is criticised for promoting her new hair care line during her movie tour, encouraging cinema-goers to bring their florals in an echo of the wear pink trend around Barbie last year, and for avoiding explicit mention of domestic violence. By the 21st of December, Lively files a lawsuit against Baldoni alleging sexual harassment. She claims Baldoni exhibited behaviour that caused her severe emotional distress. The lawsuit states that there was a meeting which was attended by individuals, including Lively, her husband Ryan Reynolds, Baldoni and their lawyers, to address her claims. Pausing there, note again the involvement of Reynolds. Now, is this simply a supportive husband who sees that his wife is distressed as a consequence of the alleged aggressive behaviour of her co-star, and doing what any husband would do to suggest, hey, stay in your own lane and back off, and I'm here to support my wife as she's very upset by your behaviour? Might this be a manifestation of emotional empathy by Ryan Reynolds by getting involved? Ordinarily he wouldn't do so, but he attends the meeting to support his wife. After all, he is married to her, and anybody would expect that a spouse would be supportive in such circumstances. Alternatively, might this be another example of Reynolds being unable to help himself, feeling the necessity of interference? Is he interfering because he sees Baldoni as some kind of threat and wishes to do him down? Does he wish to attend because he needs to assert some form of control over his wife? These are all valid considerations. Lively had a number of requirements in order for her to work on the film that, according to the lawsuit cited by the outlet, included no more showing nude videos or images of women to Blake, no more mention of Baldoni's alleged previous pornography addiction, no more discussions about sexual conquests in front of Blake and others, no further mentions of cast and crew's genitalia, no more inquiries about Blake's weight, and no further mention of Blake's dead father. Given these requirements and Reynolds' involvement in the meeting, is this again, quite simply, the poor behaviour of Baldoni and Lively quite properly responding, issuing demands for him to stop behaving in that manner, and Reynolds supports her? Or is it the case that this behaviour, if it did take place, is actually deemed as threatening to Reynolds' control over his wife, and it's him that is stipulating these demands? Might it be that he's the originator, that he's seeking to nullify a potential threat to control in relation to his wife by Baldoni's behaviour? Then again, is it the case that none of this has actually occurred, and this is a concerted effort either by Lively on her own, with Reynolds blindly supporting her because she's his wife, or is it a case of joint enterprise between the two that have concocted these demands and requirements as a necessity of stifling the position of Baldoni? There were further requests and demands in relation to no more adding of sex scenes, oral sex on camera, climaxing by Blake Lively outside the scope of the script, and it appears that Sony Pictures, the distributors, agreed and approved those requests. Lively claimed in her filing that as a consequence of the issuing of these demands, Baldoni then began a campaign to destroy her reputation in response. Is this the response of Baldoni to a threat to his need for control? Or is this simple smearing that's being taken place by Lively, aided and abetted by Reynolds, either consciously or merely supporting his wife? On the 22nd of December, New York Times investigation alleges that there was a PR campaign orchestrated to bury Lively. Baldoni is still being painted as the villain. The same date, Baldoni is dropped by his talent agency. Baldoni, previously represented by the WME agency, parted ways with the actor following Lively's lawsuit. Lively, who is also represented by WME along with her husband, Reynolds, accused Baldoni of sexual harassment and alleged the actor had launched a campaign to destroy her reputation. Now, this cessation of representation forms the basis for several heads of claim, which we'll come to, in Baldoni's lawsuit against Reynolds, Lively and others. Could it therefore be that either WME saw that Baldoni was behaving poorly and decided that they would drop him as a client, and they did so of their own volition? Might they have continued to represent him with a warning? Or was it the case that they were induced to do this as a consequence of the overtures from Lively and Reynolds, either as a reaction to the genuine poor behaviour of Baldoni, or as part of an orchestrated joint enterprise to try and destroy him? On the 23rd of December, certain Hollywood stars came out in support of Lively. Colleen Hoover, the author of the best-selling book that formed the basis of the film, Gwyneth Paltrow, American Ferrera, Amy Schumer, and Paul Feig shared messages supporting Lively. 23rd of December, Baldoni's lawyers respond to the sexual harassment lawsuit. The lawyer states audiences found Lively's own actions, interviews, and marketing during the promotional tour distasteful, and responded organically to that, which the media themselves picked up upon. In other words, Blake Lively brought it on herself. On the 24th of December, Baldoni has an award for being an ally to women rescinded. 25th of December, Baldoni's former publicist sues him over a breach of contract. Accordingly, Baldoni is very much being portrayed as the villain of the piece, a sexual harasser with various names in Hollywood, supporting Lively, his agency dropping him, his publicist suing him, and the New York Times suggesting that he has actively orchestrated, following his sexual harassment, a PR campaign to try and bury Lively. So far, could it be that actually Lively and Reynolds are the innocent parties as a consequence of the machinations of Baldoni? On the 27th of December, Reynolds hints at a difficult time. He states that the negative press affected him. He hadn't addressed the furore directly, but he hinted at a difficult time, which saw him appear in character as the Marvel anti-hero Deadpool for a short clip that starred Wonder Woman actor Linda Carter. In the caption, he suggested that recent experiences had eaten away at him, calling it a time where he really didn't feel like putting the suit on. Is this the reaction of a person genuinely feeling the pressure of awful allegations made against him, as in conjunction with his wife, Is it the case that he's feeling the pressure of unpleasant behaviour that has been meted out against his wife as a consequence of the alleged sexual harassment? Or is this simply somebody that is deciding to dole out a pity play? Feel sorry for me because I'm feeling the heat, I'm feeling the pressure. On the 1st of January, matters escalate as Baldoni sues the New York Times for $250 million. In this, he claims that Reynolds aggressively berated him. He claims that Baldoni, who suffers from back problems, asked Lively how much she weighed before he lifted her to ensure he could safely perform the lift without injury. This, apparently, infuriated Reynolds, causing him to lash out. Now, assuming, and it appears to be the case, that this was something that was done, it would seem on the face of it to be a fair observation. I'd just like to know how much you weigh to ensure that I don't injure my back. It's not a suggestion that she's fat. Indeed, you only need to look at the pictures of her to know that she's not. Nevertheless, Reynolds has interpreted that as some form of fat-shaming. Is this simply a husband that once again is defending his wife? Or is this the hypersensitive reaction of somebody that regards their wife as an extension of themselves, and the suggestion that she is overweight or too heavy impacts upon him by virtue of her being that extension and threatens his need for control? To my mind, the fact of Reynolds berating Baldoni for this comment strikes me as an excessive response. On the 1st of January, Lively officially sues Baldoni. She'd filed a legal complaint in December that detailed claims against the co-star and director, and accused him and his PR team of organising a sophisticated scheme to undermine her reputation in retaliation for speaking up about alleged misconduct on set. So earlier, she had suggested that Baldoni had sexually harassed her. Now, she's claiming that he has embarked in a calculated smear campaign against her. On the 17th of January, Baldoni countersues Lively and Reynolds for $400 million. Thus, after weeks of threatening to countersue Lively and Reynolds, Baldoni finally filed a $400 million lawsuit against the couple for allegedly attempting to destroy his reputation and career. If this is accurate, the behaviour of Reynolds, if it's correct that he sought to destroy somebody's reputation and career, demonstrates an individual behaving with an absence of emotional empathy. Lively's legal team explained that Baldoni's lawsuit was another chapter in the abuser playbook. Is this accurate, or is this projection? This is an age-old story. A woman speaks up with concrete evidence of sexual harassment and retaliation, and the abuser attempts to turn the tables on the victim. This is what experts call DAVO, deny, attack, reverse victim offender, they said. On the 21st of January, just days later, Baldoni releases a damning video. In an attempt to demonstrate his innocence, his legal team released a 7-minute-long video showing Lively and Baldoni's interaction while shooting a dance scene in the film. The clip revealed their conversation was mostly professional, with the unedited footage showing the moment previously highlighted by Lively that saw Baldoni kiss her neck while commenting on Lively's scent. In the clip, Baldoni said, "Lively smells good," in response to concerns she was getting spray tan on him. Following the clip's release, Lively swiftly shared her own statement in response to the unedited footage, stating, "Justin Baldoni and his lawyer may hope that this latest stunt will get ahead of the damaging evidence against them, but the video itself is damning," although the statement notably doesn't go on to explain why. The 28th of January, a trial date is set for March the 9th, 2026. 30th of January, Lively and Reynolds asked for Baldoni's lawsuit to be dismissed. And then director Justin Baldoni followed through on his promise to release a website aimed at refuting Blake Lively's claims against him. On the 1st of February, the lawsuitinfo.com went live. It features 2 key documents. Baldoni's legal team had previously announced the website, stating that it would present all correspondence as well as relevant videos to disprove Lively's accusations. It contains an amended complaint running to 224 pages, which details Baldoni and his production company, Wayfarer's grievances against Lively, and a timeline of relevant events running to 168 pages, tracking events from January 2019, when Baldoni first approached author Colleen Hoover about adapting It Ends With Us into a film. There are, in effect, 4 legal actions. The one launched on the 21st of December, where Lively sues Baldoni, alleging sexual harassment. The one on the 1st of January, where Baldoni sues the New York Times. A further one on the 1st of January, where Lively sues Baldoni, alleging a smear campaign against her. And the 17th of January, where Baldoni countersues Lively and also Reynolds for $400 million. That is the origin of the dispute and how it has escalated to lawsuits. And it's important to provide that because it's context within which the actions of Reynolds can be seen. We're now going to turn to the specific parts of Baldoni's lawsuit which mentions Reynolds. Reynolds is actually mentioned 49 times in all in the lawsuit. It starts off in paragraph 8 by stating, when Blake Lively faced significant public backlash from what was often referred to as her tone-deaf and insensitive press tour for the film, she doubled down on her false and misleading accusations against Baldoni. She seemed determined to make Baldoni the real-life villain in her story. Her publicist, Leslie Sloan, went so far as to propagate malicious stories portraying Baldoni as a sexual predator, a term Lively's husband, Ryan Reynolds, also used to describe Baldoni when he called Baldoni's own agent. Now, either this is an accurate term in relation to Baldoni, or it's smearing by Reynolds. Might this smearing be based on a misunderstanding of what he's been told by his wife, a misunderstanding of what he has seen, or might it be generated by a narcissist that sees this other person as a sexual predator because they're viewed as a threat to his control over his wife? All appropriate considerations, but it's noteworthy that Reynolds was moved to describe another party as a sexual predator. The lawsuit makes mention of how Lively sent Baldoni a long text describing how directors never permitted her to write scenes for the movies she's acted in, nor gave her writing credits, and that she asked to take a pass at writing the rooftop scene in It Ends With Us, in which the characters Ryle and Lily first meet. Baldoni was reluctant about this. He was reluctant to have an actor rather than a union screenwriter rewrite, but he felt that he needed to allow her to try. The draft that she sent to Baldoni dramatically differed from what had been written originally, and Baldoni was hesitant about many of the changes. He diplomatically told her that the scene would likely end up being somewhere between the original version and the version that Lively had written. Seemingly stung by Baldoni's exceedingly mild resistance, Lively didn't respond and went silent for a number of days. And then she confirmed in a text message, of course, didn't feel great for me, and made mention of a mega celebrity friend, and Ryan Reynolds. What Lively was referring to was an earlier meeting where Lively summoned Baldoni to her New York penthouse, where Baldoni was greeted by Ryan Reynolds, who launched into enthusiastic praise for Lively's version of the scene. Pausing there, is this just a husband being supportive of his wife and saying, it's great what she's written? Or is this a man who fails to recognise the boundary that this isn't his production, that he's interfering in it, and that he's treating his wife as an extension of himself and suggesting that it ought to be used? It's also stated that as the meeting was ending, a famous and famously close friend of Reynolds and Lively walked into the room and similarly began praising Lively's script, as if, of course, this had been prearranged. Baldoni understood the subtext. He needed to comply with Lively's direction for the script. The fact is that it would appear that Baldoni wasn't just dealing with Lively. he was also facing Lively's dragons, two of the most influential and wealthy celebrities in the world, who were not afraid to make things difficult for him. If my understanding is correct, I think one of those dragons is Taylor Swift, and it would appear, therefore, that not only is Reynolds bringing pressure to bear for the purposes of getting his wife's writing accepted, but also that they have hired another individual to put pressure upon Baldoni. This is redolent of the necessity of having a form of control, and also shows an absence of emotional empathy towards Baldoni's own production. Furthermore, it's stated that more than a year later, during a red carpet interview at the New York film premiere, Lively stated, "The iconic rooftop scene, my husband actually wrote it. Nobody knows that but you now." This revelation directly contradicted Lively's previous insistence that she'd written the scene, and, of course, cast Reynolds' high praise for the rewritten scene in a different light. The film's credited screenwriter, when asked about the claim that Reynolds had written the scene, graciously responded, "So if I'm being told that Ryan wrote that, then great, how wonderful." She went on to acknowledge, "There were a few little flourishes that I did not write, and if those flourishes came from Ryan, I think that's wonderful." This was the first time that the Wayfarer parties, the production company and Baldoni, etc., learned that Reynolds, who had no formal role whatsoever in the film's production, had made unauthorized changes to the script in secret. Baldoni, equally blindsided by this news, which he discovered in real time during a recorded interview with Access Hollywood, reacted also by praising Reynolds so as not to harm Lively. The fact is that Reynolds was contributing writing services for the rooftop scene, even though he wasn't to be involved. And therefore, it would appear that Reynolds is interfering in a production that is his own by writing scenes which he passes off as actually coming from his wife, but it was actually done by him. It would appear that Lively had no problem with him doing this, and it also demonstrates that Reynolds was praising himself when he was meant to be praising Lively. This level of interference goes way beyond any support for his wife because it's about him. He has chosen to insert himself into a film that has nothing to do with him by rewriting a scene, and doing so, presumably by convincing his wife to make it seem as if she is the one that's done it, so that it can be inserted. She's gone along with this, maybe under duress, maybe willingly. We will be thinking about that separately when it comes to her. But this demonstrates clear absence of emotional empathy for the impact that it has, a lack of boundary recognition, and a sense of entitlement to insert his writing in the film, and to do so in a way where it was being described as that of his wife's. The complaint goes on to state that on the 25th of April 2023, Lively summoned Baldoni to her penthouse, purportedly to discuss the script. However, he was met by an angry Reynolds, who screamed at Baldoni and accused him of fat-shaming his wife. "How dare you fucking ask about my wife's weight? What's wrong with you?" The confrontation was so aggressive that Baldoni felt he had no choice but to offer repeated and completely unwarranted apologies for what was a good faith and reasonable question to ask of his trainer. Accordingly, as I mentioned earlier, might this be seen as the supportive act of a husband, or given the fact that he responded so vigorously, stating, "How dare you fucking ask about my wife's weight," is this more likely to be demonstrative of an ignition of heated fury, if, of course, this was found to have taken place? Reynolds demanded, sense of entitlement, that Baldoni remove the scene entirely. Lively refused to perform the lift scene in the end. Accordingly, this is demonstrative again, if accurate and correct, of issuing demands, and that this demonstrates that Reynolds appears to be having some degree of undue influence over decisions made in relation to the film, which may well hint at an excessive need for control. The lawsuit then details a meeting which took place. This meeting took place at Lively's home, and it was part of Lively making a return to production demands, and she wanted a meeting before filming resumed. On the day before filming, Baldoni, Jamie Heath, a Sony representative, the film's first assistant director, and 2 producers arrived with production binders in tow, excited to discuss details of resuming production. They met Lively and Reynolds. Lively brought Reynolds as her chosen representative. She didn't request any attendees from her union. Together, Reynolds and Lively blindsided the rest of the group with a list of grievances read aloud by Lively that were as troubling as they were fictional. Reynolds then launched into an aggressive tirade, berating Baldoni in what Baldoni later described as a traumatic encounter. Baldoni later said he had never been spoken to like that in his life. Again, if this is accurate, this would appear to demonstrate a sense of entitlement and an absence of emotional empathy, and quite possibly the presence of heated, ignited fury. Reynolds demanded that Baldoni apologise to Lively for actions that had either never happened or had been grossly mischaracterised. Baldoni resisted apologising for things he had not done, further enraging Reynolds. If this is accurate, this would support quite possibly a failure to apologising amounting to a threat to control and the exhibition of further heated, ignited fury. The behaviour was unacceptable, and the concern was that Lively had engaged in a concerted campaign of extortion to extract concessions and creative control over the film, and this campaign was now joined by Reynolds. Again, if this is accurate, this is interesting because either Lively has been acting at the behest of Reynolds, or Lively has unleashed Reynolds, or that it is simply a joint enterprise which Lively had led so far, and now Reynolds comes in, as you will, as the second punch. Lively had warned back in April 2023, 9 months before, that Reynolds would ensure that Lively's demands were met at every turn, which again demonstrates the nature of Reynolds interfering in something which had nothing to do with him. This does appear to go beyond that of the necessary support of a husband who's concerned about his wife and her career, and appears to be something more with the level of interaction, the nature of that interaction, and the level of interference that has taken place. It's also reported that Lively replaced the film's editors with her own choice, which was an editor often used by Reynolds. She also replaced the film's award-winning composer with composers from Reynolds' recent project, even though the film's composer had already finished the score. 2 other instances of interference, not only by Lively, but it would appear at the behest of Reynolds. Again, it might be the case that he's puppeteering her, it might be the case that she's utilising him, or, probably more likely, the 2 of them are acting in tandem, that they are undertaking a course of action which enables them to, in effect, take over the film and push Baldoni out. This may well be indicative of the necessity of an assertion of control. It's also reported that as the premiere of the film approached, Lively and Reynolds unfollowed Baldoni on social media. That could be seen potentially as an act of retaliation with regard to Baldoni's alleged poor behaviour, or, if coming from a narcissist, a form of silent treatment that has been meted out against him. Baldoni later received word that during the premiere of the movie Deadpool and Wolverine, Reynolds approached Baldoni's agency namely an executive WME, and expressed his deep disdain for Baldoni, suggesting the agency was working with a sexual predator, and at a later date demanded that the agent drop Baldoni. It would appear there that Reynolds is wielding power. Again, is this the reaction of a supportive husband to sexual harassment against his wife, or is this a man that needs to assert control and has viewed Baldoni, for whatever reasons, as a threat to that control, and this is his response to insist that other people stop representing him? A further allegation is that Reynolds and Lively continue to leave breadcrumbs in their campaign for mocking and bullying Baldoni. On the 26th of July 2024, the film Deadpool and Wolverine premiered, starring Reynolds. The film contained a new character called Nicepool, who was also portrayed by Reynolds. Reynolds portrayed Nicepool as a vicious caricature of a woke feminist before concluding the character's arc with his violent shooting death at the hands of Ladypool, a character voiced by Blake Lively. The Nicepool scenes were added to the film in January 2024, following the January 4th confrontation in Reynolds and Lively's apartment. It's alleged that this was a transparent and mocking portrayal of Reynolds' warped perception of Baldoni. Nicepool commented inappropriately on a female character's attractive body after childbirth, and excused his remark by claiming he identified as a feminist. Nicepool also made reference to an intimacy coordinator, and even used a hairstyle that mirrored Baldoni's previous longer hair. This is further borne out by the fact that in the credits for It Ends With Us, Lively expressly thanked Gordon Reynolds, the false name that Reynolds used for his credit for portraying Nicepool. It suggested that, therefore, Reynolds was mocking and bullying Baldoni through the creation of Nicepool. If that allegation is correct, such behaviour is demonstrative of a sense of entitlement, it's manipulative, and demonstrates an absence of emotional empathy. The lawsuit contemplates what may have driven Lively to try and take over control of the film, to make it all about her. And one suggestion was that Lively may have felt driven to match her star husband Ryan Reynolds, who is widely reported to have insisted on taking so much control over the film Deadpool 2 that the director Tim Miller left the production. Miller stated that Reynolds' possessiveness drove him to leave the franchise. In an interview, Miller explained how creative differences led to his eventual departure from the film. It became clear that Ryan wanted to be in control of the franchise. You can work that way as a director quite successfully, but I can't. I don't mind having a debate, but if I can't win, I don't want to play. And I don't think you can negotiate every creative decision. There's too many to make. So Ryan is the face of the franchise, and he was the most important component of that by far. So if he decides he wants to control it, then he's going to control it. The suggestion, therefore, once again, that Reynolds is an individual that exhibits controlling behaviour, which may well be commensurate with a particular personality type. The next substantial involvement of Reynolds in the allegations in the lawsuit comes in August the 12th, 2024. Jamie Heath, the CEO of Wayfarer and Able, had a call with two executives from their then talent agency. And one admitted that the root of Lively's problems was focusing the promotion of the film on frivolities like fabulous premiere dresses, Hollywood glamour, and the commercial benefits for Lively brands, while Baldoni had always maintained his public focus on amplifying the voices of domestic violence survivors. This goes back to the allegations that Lively was tone deaf with regard to her promotion of the film. She was focusing on matters which were pertinent to her brands, while Baldoni wanted to make it about domestic violence survivors because that was what the film related to. The executive communicated the demand from Lively and Reynolds that Wayfarer, Heath and Baldoni make a public apology that day, and that if they failed to do so, the gloves would come off. If this is accurate, this would appear that there was an issuing of a demand and a threat, that certain action had to be taken, and if it was not, there would be consequences. An executive on the call admitted that no one pushes back on Lively and Reynolds, which suggests that the two of them have a need to have their own way. There was discussion between the executive and Lively and Reynolds previously about the overwhelming tide of negative publicity that they'd faced over the past few days in August 2024. Jamie Heath explained that wayfarer Baldoni and himself had no connection to the negative publicity, but notwithstanding this, the executive told Jamie Heath that Lively and Reynolds had demanded that Wayfarer put out a statement accepting blame for the problems during filming, with an express threat that they themselves would attack Wayfarer in the press if Wayfarer refused. The executives that Heath and Abel were having the call with said that Reynolds and Lively had dictated a statement that they required Wayfarer to put out, calling It Ends With Us a troubled production and forcing Wayfarer to take accountability for the problems in the production. The statement, dated August the 12th, 2024, stated, It Ends With Us was a troubled production which we take full accountability for. We are very sorry to everyone we caused upset to privately and publicly. Blake Lively, Colleen Hoover, the entire cast and crew led with professionalism every step of the way. Any negativity aimed at them is ours to own. We mutually agreed that the cast would be promoting the film separately and understood why. We have always said we are not perfect, and even if unintentionally make mistakes, we will always own them. We hold ourselves accountable. It's not anyone's job but ours, and that's part of being man enough. We will practice what we preach. We are learning and growing from the experience, and we thank everyone for their patience as we find a better way to proceed. We are very proud of the film and the welcome arms that it's been received. Part of our work is to have uncomfortable conversations for public growth. The film is doing that on screen, and we are doing that off screen. Thank you to the cast and public for the opportunity to be imperfect and be given the space to learn and grow. Accordingly, leaving aside what this says about Lively, but Reynolds not only has again interfered, but he has interfered in a way whereby he is seeking to deflect criticism of both him and Lively by making Baldoni and Heath and others sign up to a statement that he and Lively have drafted, whereby basically they take the fall, that they claim that it was a troubled production and that the problem lies with them and not with Lively or Reynolds. Such behaviour, in light of the suggestion that it was brought upon by Lively's own behaviour and Reynolds' interference, not only appears to be grossly hypocritical, but it demonstrates a seeming sense of entitlement. Again, one thing for you to consider in relation to all of this, is it that Baldoni is the aggressor, Lively is the victim, and we have a drama triangle, with Baldoni being the perpetrator, Lively being the victim, and Reynolds playing the part of rescuer. And that Reynolds' own behaviour, whilst interfering, entitled and demanding, and showing a reduction in emotional empathy, was simply the reaction to an external stressor, namely the behaviour of Baldoni. Or is it nothing to do with that, and in actual fact, that he is the perpetrator, that he is the one that is lashing out as against Baldoni, who is the victim, possibly in concert with his wife, that Reynolds is the one, driven by a pathological need for control, interferes in a production which has nothing to do with him, rewriting a scene but claiming that it's his wife that had done it, that he is involved in making demands about how Blake Lively was to be treated on a return to production, that he had got in the face of Justin Baldoni and swearing at him, querying why he had asked about the weight of Blake Lively, and now issuing a statement which basically is designed to take the criticism away from him and his wife and place it at the door of Baldoni. You, naturally, can form your own views about all of that. Now, aside from the causes of action, which I'll come to presently, these are the specific allegations in the main that one finds in Baldoni's lawsuit, which has a number of defendants, but obviously Blake Lively and Reynolds are the chief defendants. There is a further aspect to the litigation. In essence, the claim contends that Lively could not accept responsibility for her own self-inflicted negative image, and she, in essence, needed a scapegoat. And therefore, in effect, she conspired with Reynolds to blame Baldoni, suggesting that he was guilty of sexual harassment when he wasn't, that they sought to take control of Baldoni's film production and premiere, and then thereafter sought to destroy Baldoni's public image, livelihood, and finances, that they conspired with the New York Times to destroy Baldoni. It's clear that whilst the lawsuit mentions Lively's behaviour more than Reynolds, it does rely on the two conspiring to harm Baldoni. And naturally, since the duo are husband and wife, that's certainly not a massive leap of logic to make that they will have worked in tandem. For a moment, let's just consider potentially what motivation might be behind all of this. Well, there's been plenty of it, and it naturally is speculation. Might it be the case that Lively and Baldoni became close, and Reynolds was jealous of his wife, and this was the response, that he issued these demands and became all the more involved? Might it be that Lively and Baldoni engaged in intimate relations, and Reynolds was jealous of his wife? Remember, Reynolds has a history of having intimate relations with his own co-stars. With that behaviour, perhaps there was paranoia on his part, that he feared that this was going to happen between Lively and Baldoni. After all, might he have been envious of Baldoni, who is a clearly handsome fellow, and that this activity was done to try and stop the potential for Lively and Baldoni to be intimate, and that Reynolds forced his wife to engage in this war against Baldoni, or did she do so willingly? Might it be that Reynolds couldn't help himself but interfere because he was envious of his wife's success, because it was all about her and not him? In actual fact, there was nothing untoward going on between her and Baldoni. But the envy and jealousy experienced by Reynolds, driven by a pathological need for control, caused this. Well, these are all considerations we may well look at after an analysis of the primary participants in this drama triangle. But it's worth just putting those points there as matters to consider more generally. There are several claims against Reynolds. There's one for civil extortion, basically suggesting that demands for money, property, services, or other sources of value would be conferred upon him and also his wife, and other people referred to as the lively parties, and that this caused harm to Baldoni and others. That Reynolds was involved, alongside others, in making statements to persons, including the New York Times, to the effect that Baldoni and others engaged in, permitted, and failed to prevent sexually inappropriate conduct towards Lively and others. There's a claim for false light invasion of privacy, basically portraying Baldoni in a poor light, that there was intentional interference with contractual relations, i.e., causing WME to sever representation of Baldoni. This also included intentional interference with prospective economic advantage and negligent interference with prospective economic advantage. It's a heavyweight claim in terms of value, and it details these various heads of claim as against Ryan Reynolds on the basis of his own acts of interference, as have been pleaded in the document, but also on the basis that in effect he's acted in a conspiracy or in tandem with his wife. Those are the major allegations that are made in the Baldoni lawsuit. It's important to remember nothing has been proven, although considerable evidence by way of screenshots and text messages, etc., have been provided in support of the allegations, which would carry some weight. The evidence has not been tested. We have to take into account the repetition of the allegations, the efficacy of the evidence, whilst keeping in mind that these are simply allegations contained in a substantial lawsuit. But nevertheless, they do fall to be considered as part of the analysis of Ryan Reynolds. We've looked through Ryan Reynolds with regard to his upbringing in childhood, his relationship with his mother, with his father, with his siblings. We've looked at the timeline of his intimate relationships and the nature of those relationships. We've considered what former intimate partners have had to say about him. We've looked at whether there's been criticism or simply silence or approval of him. We've looked at his career in terms of the success that he's joined and observations that have been made by those that have worked with him. It's worth making the point that whilst there have been complaints issued, he'll have worked with far many other people who have remained silent. Have they remained silent because there's nothing to say about him, because he conducts himself ordinarily in a decent fashion? Or do many of those individuals simply stay silent because whilst they've witnessed poor behaviour, they know better than to speak out about it as a consequence of the potential that it would prevent them from working again, particularly in relation to what has become a rather powerful figure in Hollywood. We've also examined his business career and the success that he's enjoyed in relation to that, alongside his public image and philanthropy, and of course, more latterly, the ongoing spat involving his wife and Baldoni and the lawsuits that have flowed from that. It all makes for a very interesting collection of evidence. And in the next part, I'll provide you with the conclusion to make the determination as to what Ryan Reynolds is. Based upon what you've heard so far, I'd invite you, ahead of the conclusion, to share your thoughts in the comments section. Do you think this is an empathic individual that has gone to war on behalf of his wife after her poor treatment at the hands and mouth of Justin Baldoni? Do you think that this is just a normal chap who's been subjected to the vagaries of Hollywood and similarly has seen that his wife has been mistreated and has done what anybody would and has stood up for her, sometimes vociferously? Do you see that this is quite a narcissistic individual who's rather self-absorbed, and this is shown in much of his behaviour, but there isn't a pathological need for control? It isn't somebody that needs fuel. He isn't somebody that reacts in the manner described in relation to a potential threat to control. Or do you see this as an individual that meets the criteria for a narcissist? An individual who regularly operates with a sense of entitlement, operating with an absence of accountability, who shows no emotional empathy, possibly cognitive empathy. An individual that operates a very good facade, who is manipulative, who fails to recognise boundary recognition and has duped many people into believing that his cheeky chappy persona is entirely harmless, when in actual fact it's more about devaluing individuals. Let me know your thoughts in the comments section ahead of the conclusion. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.